Welcome to our technical assistance training for the Victims of Crime Act Notice of Funding Opportunity for the VOCA Services for Underserved Victims of Violent Crime program. My name is Ron Reichelt, and I am the Victim Service Programs Administrator for the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority. ICJIA has made available a minimum of $6,174,170 in VOCA grant funding for the development or expansion of services for underserved victims of violent crime and related support costs for victims of crime. Applicant programs will focus services on one or more of the underserved groups listed and develop and provide services in a way that meets the needs of that specific group. Please note that offender services are not eligible under the VOCA funded program, but victim services for those who may also be offenders who may be incarcerated are eligible. All services must concern the victimization, and the victimization must be connected to a violent crime as listed in Illinois statute. As part of the application, applicants must select the underserved groups they expect to work with so ICJIA can assess any service gaps. Applications must discuss their history and capacity to provide these services and explain how services are delivered to meet the needs of the underserved groups selected. Part of your program design should include information and referral services. The referral process must include contacting referral agency and scheduling appointments, as well as tracking clients outside appointments. Advocacy is also a required service under this program. Advocacy also includes providing supportive services such as child or dependent care and transportation assistance. Please note the Victims of Crime Act funds cannot be used for prevention. Funding for prevention services should not be included in this application. VOCA funding is intended to provide direct services to assist victims of crime and certain limited training and administrative expenses. An example of prevention services that should not be included in the application would be funding police officers to patrol services to protect high crime areas. Another example of prevention education to prevent individuals from becoming crime victims. However, grantees may use VOCA funding for projects that are integrated with victim services through outreach or resources for victims. Comprehensive mental health and support services may also be included, but it's optional. These services can be subcontracted to an outside provider. Requirements are explained in more detail in section D6I of the solicitation in paragraph entitled Subcontracts. A case manager position is required. Applications must clearly explain the activities and responsibilities of the case manager position and how this position will interact with clients and other program staff. A community outreach specialist position is also required as part of the application. This position may be filled as a peer support provider who uses their personal experience from recovery from victimization and or exposure to violence and skills learned in formal training to deliver services to promote recovery and resilience. All direct service staff should be included. Staff plans should include ability to serve clients with various levels and lengths of service needs. Supervision of direct service staff should also be included. Optional positions would be a clinician. This staff member must hold a master's degree and have a clinical license, such as an LCPC, LCSW, or LMFT. Clinical supervision should also be included. Psychiatric assistance is also available, but optional through this program. These services can also be subcontracted. Program elements that must be included. Core services for victims that provide information and referrals, advocacy, emotional support and safety, and assertive outreach and engagement with underserved populations. Your program should explain how a low barrier screening and intake process is used. Hours of operation and intake should be beyond traditional working hours. Translation and interpretation services should be included. Transportation services for clients also should be included. Trauma skill training for staff. Services must be provided free of charge. Subgrantees must comply with all prescribed assessment tools and reporting requirements. Assistance with child or dependent care must also be included. Applicants must include trauma skill training for their staff to improve trauma-informed response to clients and to increase their knowledge of strategies for mitigating vicarious trauma among staff members. Eligible applicants are open to public agencies and nonprofit organizations. Nonprofit organizations include nonprofit hospitals working with underserved victims of violent crime. Eligible applicants should be able to show a record of effective services. Demonstrate a record of providing effective direct services to crime victims and financial support from sources other than VOCA funds. New programs that have not yet demonstrated a record of providing services may be eligible for VOCA funds if they can demonstrate that a minimum of 25% of their financial support comes from sources other than VOCA funds. Please note that as per the National Emergency Pandemic Mandatory Match Waiver Policy, no match is required for this application. Match funds will be required for this grant during the second and third year of the performance period. If the applicant wishes to decline the match waiver and include match in the submitted budget, the match is calculated as 20% of the total cost of the project funded. Federal grant funds requested under this application may not exceed 80% of the total cost of the project. Selected programs will be required to submit quarterly data reports through the OVCPMT system, as well as the submission of series of narrative questions to ICJIA. The objectives selected during the application process will be monitored throughout the grant and can be adjusted prior to the beginning of any continuation of the program. Applications should be submitted for no less than $100,000 in federal award funds and no more than $500,000 in federal award funds. Application submissions are due by 5 p.m. on November 15th, 2023. Applications that do not follow the mandatory formatting will be eliminated from consideration. ICJIA encourages applications are submitted at least 72 hours prior to the formal deadline to ensure completion of the submission. An entity may not apply for grants until the entity is registered and pre-qualified through the Grant Accountability and Transparency Act, GATA, grantee portal. Registration and pre-qualification are required each state fiscal year. Proposals will be reviewed by a panel of staff and key stakeholders with expertise in victim services. Proposal selection will be made using the described scoring criteria explained on page 21 of the NOFO. If possible, ICJIA will fund the highest scoring applicant in each geographic region before funding successive applicants. Questions may be submitted at the email address listed. A frequently asked questions, or FAQ, will be updated every Friday and distributed on our website. Questions may be summarized to include all summary questions submitted or similar questions submitted. The deadline for the submission of questions is 5 p.m. on November 9th, 2023. Thank you very much.